Good morning, ladies. Or at this point, is it just good morning to the only two people who we know are going to be watching this show? It is week 17. It is the culmination of months of effort to boil down to only two people who even care about what's going to happen this week. Congratulations to Taylor and Phil. Good morning to Dan. How you doing today, buddy?
Doing great. Excited to end this fantasy season of misery.
Yeah, now the season sucks for me too. I don't know what happened in the last 7 days, but now I just don't care anymore. Like, why are we even doing this show? I get what you brought up a few weeks ago. Um, so yeah, week 16, there was no drama in the semifinal matchups whatsoever. Taylor beat my ass pretty thoroughly with just sheer shitty play from his wide receivers. It didn't even matter that he was better than me at wide receiver. And Phil handled business against Xavier, even, losing Jalen Hurts, which is going to come up again for this week. So not a whole lot of drama going into the semifinal matchups. But before we are going into the championship from the semifinal matchups, but Dan, there's been some interesting developments in football this week, and I'm speaking specifically about the Raiders and the Titans. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the Raiders in a bit. But speaking specifically about the Raiders and the Titans and just kind of like giving up in week 17. And then there's the possibility Jacksonville could do the same. Depends on whether you believe Doug Peterson or not. My first question to you, Dan, and the league, if any of you are watching this, I would love comments on the message board, the video, text messages. This is important and it's probably going to come up later. Dan, we switched to the 14 game schedule to eliminate or to stay with the NFL schedule when they increased their roster. The main issue being the NFL brought week 14 buys into the fold, and we didn't want that affecting our playoffs. Well, now with week 17 still almost being as meaningless as it used to be, do we need to consider a 13 game schedule where at least you can plan for a playoff bye instead of, finding out that Derek Carr doesn't play for your team anymore and your team is completely fucked? Like, is the known evil better than the surprise evil?
So my thought is this that you can't have buys in the playoffs because it could really ruin someone's. They could have a great season, and then because of that bye, losing the playoffs. Whereas I understand it sucks what's going on with Derek Carr and the Raiders, but what's the difference if Derek Carr tore his ACL last week?
Yeah.
It's one guy potentially. I mean, I understand the Titan situation, so it's two guys you want to talk about. Derrick Henry is the only real Titan that's fantasy relevant. But again, that's not something that's planned. You can't, like, we had this situation. We didn't have any of this last year. Is this just a one time thing? Is it going to occasionally happen? Is that enough to change the league? I don't think so. I think we should stay the way we are. It's just like, to me, I look at it as an injury. Now, if it 3-4 years from now we see it happening more prominently, more than just one or two players, then that's a different discussion potentially. But at this point, I don't think so.
The Jacksonville game is one to monitor because if they end up doing surprise benchings, and another one I want to bring up that's affecting me in a lot of other leagues is the Los Angeles Chargers and Justin Herbert, who's played like absolute shit anyway. But if there's surprise benchings, guys who are sat down at halftime of week 17 games, I think that adds fuel to this fire. But I completely agree. The bye week in the playoffs was one of my big proponents to go ahead and get this whole thing pushed up a week and create the rival week and everything. So before we get into the championship game, our number one and only fan, Drifter Thrifter, how you doing, buddy? Happy New Year.
Happy
Happy to
New
have
Year.
you. It's about, what is it, 16 hours till New Year's for us here in the East Coast of the United States. But happy to have you. And yeah, Traylon Burks is starting to look interesting. The quarterback situation there, we kind of touched on this. What is Tennessee going to do? Ryan Tannehill has been shit this year, but he was actually pretty good last year. Malik Willis certainly doesn't look ready, Dan, but he has a offseason to get prepared. Clearly, Josh Dobbs, 8 Daves on the team, not the answer.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Burks has potential, but I just don't know what that quarterback situation is going to look like with the way it is. I just don't trust Burks.
Yeah, something I was going to talk about at the end of the show is we are going to continue this show after the fantasy season is over. So you're going to hear us talk about a lot of stuff like that. Is how does draft situations and things like that affect other players? And we're actually going to touch on that a little bit at the end of this show with free agent running backs. But before we do that, we got to get to the whole reason we do this show, and that is 100% our championship matchup. Dan, it's kind of chalk, if you will. These were two teams that we got high on early. Obviously, it's taken you some time on Phil, but we got high on these teams early. They've been two of the best, if not the best teams in the league for the entire season. It's Taylor taking on Phil. This is an interesting matchup. I kind of have notes for each team, but I'm going to start you off with their history. So they played back in week 2. Phil won that matchup by 52 points. So just a thorough beatdown. I think it was 165 to 113 or something like that. However, Phil had Jalen Hurts at that time, and Taylor was still playing the Matt Stafford game, which clearly wasn't working out for him. Neither team had a good tight end. They both since fixed that with Evan Ingram and TJ Hawkinson. So I guess, Dan, let's start with Phil. Clearly, you're down on Phil. Let's just start with your takes on Phil's team, not necessarily his matchup with Taylor, but Phil's team and their matchups this week.
Kind of goes back to him not having Hurts. I think it's gonna crush him. Hurts has carried him. I said it last week, and I said last week that the only way he was winning last week is if Xavier's team didn't show up, and Xavier's team did not show up. Scoring 80-some points in the semifinals is a killer. You're not going to win that. Phil getting 100 points, even that you would have. But you told me before the day, hey, Phil's going to score 100 points. I would have said Phil lost.
100%. Yeah. For me, the Jalen Hurts thing doesn't. It's bad. It's very bad. Purdy is at least in a good spot this week, taking on a Rams defense that, while the Rams defense has played well, they've played out of their league and they haven't really faced a team as good as San Francisco.
Purdy's going against Vegas.
Oh, is it Vegas? My bad. I don't know where I got Rams from. That was a couple weeks ago. Going against Vegas, who has clearly given up. So let's be perfectly clear there. And it's not like San Francisco is going to bench Purdy at halftime or anything weird like that. So should be a very easy matchup for Brock Purdy is the point I was trying to get to, though I had the wrong team. So are we less concerned, or is it just the fact that Brock Purdy isn't halfway on the level of Jalen Hurts?
It's just not. I think Purdy will get him his 15 points, but I think Phil needed Hurts to get him his typical 25 to 35 range to keep him there, because I think Chubb going against Washington's defense is not great. Diggs against the Bengals defense will be interesting. It could be a high-scoring game, but the Bengals defense has also done well against number 1 receivers this year.
Yeah.
Cooper, again, going against Washington's defense. Do you trust Deshaun Watson at this point to really?
So that was one of the questions I had, Dan, is could a bad Washington secondary break Amari Cooper out of his slump? It doesn't sound like you think it might, because Amari Cooper has not scored 10 fantasy points since week 12 for Phil.
Watson has not looked good against teams that have good pass rushes, and that's what Washington has. They have a good pass rush. They're going to pressure on him. It's always hard for Watson to get to him. Walker hasn't looked the same since he got hurt a few weeks ago. I think he's only had one game above 10 points in the last 4.
Yeah.
It's a lot of rough matchups. Phil's team is banged up right now. Taylor should walk away.
All right. So Dan declaring his winner before we even talk about Taylor's team. Last question I want to ask you about Phil, because you kind of touched on it. I don't know how much I trust J.K. Dobbins. The yards per carry have looked great, but he hasn't really had great performances. You don't necessarily trust Kenneth Walker. Should Jerick McKinnon be on Phil's bench right now?
That's a tough call. McKinnon has been a monster lately.
Yeah. Double-digit points in his last 4 games.
Against Denver, who's just had the coaching change. So that's interesting, because teams that have a coaching change mid-season, their record is like 6-3 over the last 9.
Wow.
Coming out with the new coach and playing harder. So that could be an interesting game to keep an eye on.
Yeah. First and foremost, congratulations to Drifter. Let's get that championship W. Hear all about that championship you're getting. Losing Pollard is tough, but I mean, at least you knew going in. It's not like he got hurt in the first quarter. He didn't T. Higgins us, which is going to be my new term, since he did it to us twice. And yeah, San Francisco's D, I was glad I held on to them in quite a few leagues. They've obviously been a great fantasy asset, and this week they might win some championships this week pretty easily. Yeah, so those are my notes for Phil's team. Really, it was the Jerick McKinnon thing that just has me worried. Obviously, I'm as concerned with you with Jalen Hurts, but I do like the Brock Purdy matchup a little bit. I just don't know about benching Jerick McKinnon. I don't know if Amari Cooper is going to get good. When I look over at Taylor's team, the biggest concern with Taylor's team is he has 3 stud wide receivers. Unfortunately, their quarterbacks are Teddy Bridgewater, Jarrett Stidham, and the man, the myth, the legend, Gardner Minshew. One last thing I want to touch on with Phil's team before we get into it, since I just brought his name up. Dan, am I the asshole for signing Gardner Minshew 10 days ago, knowing full well He was never going to see a spot on my team because I have Patrick Mahomes, but he is my good luck charm. I model my entire look off of Gardner Minshew. He should have been on my team for the whole season, but I had the roster spot. I took it. There's no guarantee Phil would have got him, but I'm pretty sure Phil would rather have Gardner Minshew than Brock Purdy right now. So am I the asshole for making this move?
No, not at all. Phil had the entire season. He knew Hurts was his quarterback. Hurts runs a lot. There's a chance he's going to get hurt. Like, you should have, if you're going to ride this thing out with Hurts, why did you not have his backup on your roster already?
Like I said, he's my good luck charm. He should have been on my roster too, but
listen, if you need to have your backup on your team if you can. And I've said all along, Phil's roster isn't great enough not to. I mean, at one point he had 3 or 4 defenses on his team.
Well, 3 or 4 defenses. There was the week of no tight ends. He's made some interesting moves. The no tight ends cost him his only loss this entire season. And our buddy Drifter is on our side here. McKinnon on the bench and Dobbins in the lineup is not boding well for Phil when even Drifter doesn't like it. And yeah, Tyler Algier, great play this week. I think he could be a top 10 running back this week. Not involved in our championship at all, but I do like what he has going. But back to Taylor's team. All of his wide receivers going out with backup quarterbacks, and probably Devonta Smith being the least worrisome. I think Smith and Hill, someone said that Tyreek Hill has had some of his best games with Teddy Bridgewater in the lineup, so I'm not worried about them. Davante Adams, I'm legitimately worried about because Davante Adams has had some really bad games with Derek Carr at quarterback. And now we have Jarrett Stidham, who I was surprised to find out has never started an NFL game. I thought he had. Apparently, the games I'm thinking of were all in the preseason. And this is going to kind of lead to what we're talking about in general. But like, what's going on with the Raiders? I don't understand this move. And then Dan, you just shocked the hell out of me at the beginning of the show with Brandon Ayuk Instagram posts. So why don't you go ahead and walk anybody who doesn't follow the Instagram of NFL players through that situation?
So Devontae Adams put a post up about when Derek Carr got benched, how he supports his guy, he has his guy's back, and Brandon Ayuk called him out and was like, "Well, you should sit out with him then."
Wow, like I did not realize that. And my question to you is, now that's in his head, and it was probably always in his head. How much effort is he going to get? How much playing time is he going to get? This team has I think it's seriously like a less than 1% chance to make the playoffs. It's a very low chance. So
Josh McDaniels is the head coach. Everything else that he's been through, getting fired pretty quickly in Denver,
missing that extra point in Canton,
missing the extra point. I just feel like he's going to be in that attitude of, I'm going to come out and show everybody that I'm right and tell everybody they're playing the whole game. So I think Adams will play the whole game. But where's Adams' head going to be at?
Yeah.
After the first 3 passes, get driven into the ground or get picked off because they're overthrown. It's just going to be where Adams' effort is and where his head is at. Or is he truly bought into the Raiders? Maybe he's going to come out and just try and do everything he can. It's going to be really interesting to see. I think you get an all or nothing kind of point scoring from Adams.
And what's interesting about the Niners defense, it's clearly real NFL. I think they're the best defense in the league right now. Fantasy, they're certainly top 5, top 10, if they're not top 1. They actually give up a lot of points to wide receivers while not giving up a lot of points to quarterbacks. So like Jarrett Stidham is going to have the worst game ever. Jarrett Stidham might not finish in the top 32 this week, but Davante Adams is in a spot here where he could succeed despite poor quarterback play, but does he want to? And Taylor certainly needs him to if he wants to win that first championship. So it's a rough situation. I think the another aspect of this game that's overlooked is I think New England's defense, who has actually been a top 5 play on defense this season, gets a little bit of a bump with Teddy Bridgewater in the game as well. So I like that going for Taylor. I am also calling Taylor. Dan, I know you've already called Taylor. I'm calling Taylor for the win strictly with he has the quarterback advantage. I think Justin Fields is going to have a very good game against Detroit. He's going to have a much better game than Brock Purdy is going to have against the Raiders. Taylor still has 3 solid receivers and the New England defense. Everything else kind of washes for me. I would like to see McKinnon in Phil's lineup, but all that does is give him a reason to blame us if we're wrong on that one. So I know you're calling Taylor. Do you have any notes to add at the end of the game?
I mean, I think the Detroit-Chicago game is going to be a high-scoring game. Detroit gives up 5.1 yards per carry. When you have Fields going against that, he should have a monster game rushing. Chicago gives up 4.9 yards per carry, so Swift could actually have a good game
might find himself relevant again.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a high scoring game for them. I do think it'd be pretty funny if Phil put McKinnon into his lineup and that's the difference in the game, and somehow he wins and you cost Taylor a championship. That'd be pretty funny.
I mean, I'm obviously rooting for my little brother. My narrative to this game is this is two teams fighting for their very first championship, and neither of them has been in a championship in our league. So one person is going to be very happy, and one person is just going to be counting down till the draft to get that sour taste out of their mouth.
I am looking forward to hearing Phil say how great it was. He's just excited and happy that he got to play in the championship and honor, because I can tell you right now that as a Bengals fan and as a Massillon Tiger fan, Phil has countlessly told me all the times that getting to the championship means nothing. You're just a number one loser. So I'm looking forward to his excuses on why it no longer is relevant, because that's what he's going to do.
Well, I'll feel bad for Jessie in this situation. She deserves this championship. So, Drifter calling the Las Vegas shutout. I actually said the exact same thing on my Wednesday show. I called 23-0, and I think everybody on the Niners, with the exception of maybe Brock Purdy, gets benched after halftime. I think Jordan Mason outscores Christian McCaffrey in this game. So I think it's going to be an ugly one. So that's the championship, Dan. I wanted to get into something more NFL related with you. A lot of people have been asking questions about this week, and there was a lot of posts with Josh Jacobs basically just befuddled by what the Raiders are doing. And so there are a lot of really good free agent running backs, Dan, and two of them in our league are potential keepers. So I'm going to kind of run through this list. I'm going to run through their ages, and we can kind of talk about where we think these guys are going to end up. But way more importantly, I want to talk about the first two guys, Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. Are they keepers regardless of where they end up? So you have Saquon at 26 years old, and I'm kind of going what they're going to be next year when the season starts. Josh Jacobs at 25, Miles Sanders at 26, David Montgomery at 26. The one I did not know was a free agent, Tony Pollard at 26 years old, Damian Harris at 26 years old, the touchdown machine Jamal Williams at 28, Devin Singletary at 25, Kareem Hunt at 27, Jet McKinnon at 31, Rashad Penny at 27, and then Raheem Mostert, who has put in some work for the Miami Dolphins this year, at 31 years old. So I want to start with those first two guys, Dan, two top five running backs, 26 and 25 years old, respectively. Saquon Barkley on Steve Weiss's team and Josh Jacobs on Greg's team. Regardless of landing spot, are Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley keepers next year?
I would say yes, because I think they're going to probably land in a good situation. I think they both probably end up back with their teams. I know the Giants were trying to sign Barkley mid-season, and nothing came from that. I think that they'll probably each get the franchise tag. Free agent running backs are weird. You know, they want to be paid top dollar. NFL teams don't like to pay running backs. So typically they don't get that contract from their team, their original team. No one else is going to pay for them. Think of Melvin Gordon a few years ago.
Yeah.
He thought he was going to get this big payday, ended up taking a small amount of money from Denver to go there. Le'Veon Bell thought he's going to get some giant payday, got some sort of a payday from the Jets, and then got cut, year 2 of the deal. I just don't expect big money to go out toward the free agent running backs. It's going to be really interesting this offseason what happens with some of those guys. You look at Philadelphia with Miles Sanders. Boston Scott's also a free agent. What are they going to do? They have the Kenneth Gainwell there, who they drafted a couple years ago. Will they give him a shot? Raiders are a mess. You just never know what they're going to do. I think Pollard's the most interesting one because he's never gotten that chance to be the guy.
Yeah.
Will someone do that? Or are they just going to look at the running backs in the draft? It's going to be crazy. It's going to be also, I think, even when the draft, because just, you know, we all look at those rookie running backs and think, oh, the potential there, but it all comes out of being in the right situation.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to bring up. You know the rookies better than me. Literally the only name, and I'm not even exaggerating, the only name I know coming out of this upcoming draft, I guess it's two names. I almost have one of the other quarterbacks' names, but it's CJ Stroud, Bijan Robinson, and then there's some other Bryce Young, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. I don't follow college football at all, but Bijan Robinson is super interesting. Obviously, I know he is supposed to be a really good player, and he would be one of those guys that would likely go late first round, early second, as long as he tests well.
Another name I like is Chase Brown, running back out of Illinois. I think he's going to be really good as well. There'll be some other guys that pop up between now and then, but they have to go to the right situation. I mean, Kenneth Walker, while he was great after he got the starting job, if they go somewhere and they're at the split time or not be the guy right away, it kind of really lessens their opportunities, and so that's what you want to go all in on.
I agree with you completely on Saquon Barkley back to the Giants. I actually didn't even put any other teams. Josh Jacobs is more interesting to me, and I actually did not put the Raiders at all on my list of landing spots. So I'm going to run the 4 teams I think Josh Jacobs could end up on, and it's 2 very different situations for each of these 4 teams. So you have the bad teams who are going to pay up for a running back. Do you think it's plausible that either Houston or Carolina break the bank to go get Josh Jacobs. Deontay Foreman is a free agent again. Houston or Carolina break the bank to go get Josh Jacobs. And if they do, is he a keeper?
It depends on what else Houston would do. Although I think, from my understanding, Houston loves Pierce, and
I forgot about Pierce. I don't know. I completely lost my mind on that one. I forgot about Pierce.
I think that if they address their offensive line, now Houston's going to go into this offseason with, I think, the second most free agent cap space. Nope, they're not. They're top 10. They have 46.
Chicago's number one. I know that.
Chicago's number one. Falcons and Giants, Patriots, Seahawks, Bengals, Ravens, Texans.
So they're not in a bad cap space, but they're not even.
No, they're not going to be able to. Yeah. They're not going to be able to go crazy, but they should be able to address the offensive line. Yeah. I think they'll be a good landing spot for a running back if they're not bought in on Pierce, but I think they are.
I have another name that's interesting then. So let's take Jacobs off of there. The other two teams I want to throw at you, and I think he's clearly a keeper in this situation, are contending teams who want to solidify their running back, and they've been dealing with subpar guys for the last 4 years. And that is the Buffalo Bills and the Philadelphia Eagles. Jacobs has been tied to the Eagles quite a bit in this offseason. Do you think it's plausible? Because the Bills were in the Christian McCaffrey running and were never able to get that deal going. Josh Jacobs, a very different back from Christian McCaffrey. But do you think is that a fit? And clearly he's a keeper if he ends up on those teams.
So let me say this. So the Bills have been rumored with Saquon a lot. If they're going to go up to running back, I think it's going to be Saquon over Josh.
I don't even think they're going to get a chance, to be perfectly honest. I think Saquon's going to sign pretty quickly with the Giants. So
here's the thing. The Bills are already, again, this is all projections. The projected cap next year around $225.
Yeah.
Bills are already $4 million over that. So I don't think they're going to have the opportunity to really go out and sign a running back that they want. I think that you're looking at them either bringing Singletary back or going forward with Cook as their starting running back next year.
Gabe Davis is probably a free agent as well, right? Like they're not going to have a fifth-year option on him because he wasn't an early enough pick. So
yeah, so he could be potentially. But then these teams can adjust things and move some stuff around if they really want to. But $4 million over is going to be tough. The Eagles themselves only have $14 million. But here's the thing: I believe is this Hurst's third year this year?
Yes. So they got to get ready to pay him.
So they can, as soon as the regular season ends, they can start talking contract with him. With them only having $14 million in cap space, I think that their hands are pretty much going to be tied as far as what they can really do this offseason. They're going to want to prepare themselves for that contract.
Yeah, Drifter chimes in that Jacobs is probably going to end up on a team with decent QB, which kind of eliminates Houston, which we've already eliminated in Carolina. I just didn't know if he would chase the check, and they were the only teams that really jumped out at me as maybe throwing a bunch of money at running back. Another interesting team, I only have him listed for one team here, or have them listed for one or two running backs here. Atlanta Falcons. They've gotten a lot of good play out of Tyler Algier lately. They are a team that should be built around a bruising running back, so Jacobs could be interesting there. And the NFC South is a complete mess, so maybe he's able to get there and see what's going on and consider himself in the playoff hunt. Miles Sanders, less interesting to me. Obviously not a keeper in our league. I think if he ended up, go ahead.
I disagree. I think Miles Sanders, if he would re-sign with Philadelphia, I think he's absolutely a keeper.
Interesting, really. So you're buying way more into this season than what you saw from him last season.
We've all been waiting for the Miles Sanders breakout. It just took a little longer to get there. And the second year in this system, they feel like they've really found some success with him and Hurts. I think there's potential for him to be a keeper if he re-signs with Philadelphia. Now, if he goes somewhere else, you don't know what that's going to look like, then I don't think he's a keeper.
I'm going to skip David Montgomery and his sub 4 yards per carry.
Before you go anywhere else with that, I want to say if David Montgomery leaves, if he doesn't re-sign with Chicago, I would look at Josh Jacobs ending up in Chicago.
See, and they obviously have the money, but I just don't know if that's the situation for him. But it would certainly be interesting. Maybe we should have done this by team instead of player, and maybe we'll do that later on in the season. But you bring up if Miles Sanders ends up in Philadelphia, he is still a keeper in our league. I'm going to throw another name at you. Why wouldn't Philadelphia pick the pocket of a division rival? They've been beat up by Tony Pollard in the past. If Tony Pollard ends up in Philadelphia, I think he goes from a mid-round fantasy pick to an absolute keeper.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Philadelphia's offense is set up to be very nice for running backs. So whoever ends up being the running back in Philadelphia, I think, has value at keeper. If they don't sign anybody and they just go in with Kenneth Gainwell as their guy and they don't draft somebody else.
Oh, he's not a keeper. He's trash.
I don't know about that. If he's going to go in as the number one running back there, and they don't draft anybody,
in a real fantasy draft, that would make him a 5th, 6th round pick, in my opinion, at best, not nearly a keeper in our league. I don't even think he's on a roster in our league, but I couldn't buy it. One that I think the world has given as a given. You mentioned you think Josh Jacobs stays. I think Josh Jacobs, especially after this week, is gone for sure. Damian Harris rejoining Josh McDaniels in Vegas. Do you think Harris at 26 years old can kind of step in and be what Josh Jacobs was this year?
I don't think he can. I think Harris gets hurt way too often. I don't think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be looking to pay him. If the Raiders do that with Josh Harris, with bringing in Damian Harris, I could see them drafting a running back early to team with him and that would have eliminated his fantasy value, I think, because eventually that rookie's going to take over.
Depends on how much they like Zamir White too, who hasn't got a lot of playing time this year. Jamal Williams was the guy who I kind of brought up for where I was wrong about Houston. Jamal Williams would pair nice with Dameon Pierce as he has with DeAndre Swift. I don't know if Detroit's going to let him get away. If they're not the same type of player, if Tony Pollard leaves Dallas, Jamal Williams could be a nice complement to Ezekiel Elliott. They obviously have a very similar game, but Jamal Williams was a way better pass catcher in Green Bay than he's being used at as Detroit. I also threw Carolina and Atlanta on there for Jamal Williams.
One thing I'm interested to really watch as far as running backs, the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Jones is signed. He's not a free agent.
Yeah,
but the Green Bay Packers are already $5 million over the cap for next year. If they cut Aaron Jones this offseason, it frees up $16 million, and they only have to take a $4 million cap hit.
Interesting.
$16 million is a lot of money to free up when you're $5 million over the cap when you're looking to win now.
And Jamal Williams has always made it clear that he never wanted to leave Green Bay. They just didn't want him back. Drifter brings up how it'll be musical chairs once Jacobs and Barkley get signed, and then we see what everything happens from there. One prediction I want to throw out there is I personally feel 100% certain, which means it's not going to happen. I think Kareem Hunt re-signs with the Kansas City Chiefs. I think he has done his time for his crime in the mistake by the lake that is Cleveland. I don't think Kansas City wanted to let him go, but they had to with the public relations nightmare. I think that time has passed. I think Kareem Hunt comes back to the place where he had the most success in his career, and I think he is an RB1 in 2023 with the Kansas City Chiefs.
If that would happen, I would absolutely agree that he would be an RB1. I think Kareem Hunt's career is done.
Really?
I don't think he's looked terrible. I don't think anybody's going to want to spend money on him. He's made his money. I don't think he's going to get a third contract. It's very rare for running backs to get 3 contracts. I think Kansas City's going to see what they have. They like what they have with McKinnon and Pacheco, and I could see them just rolling with that because with that Pacheco's a rookie, McKinnon's cheap. They don't.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire still on his rookie contract. Did they show him to the door?
I think he gets absolutely cut. I don't think there's any chance he gets brought back.
I threw out there my last one I'll talk about with running backs. I think Jerick McKinnon in Miami with that offense they've put together would be a very interesting prospect where you have these two blazing fast wide receivers. You're likely going to lose Mike Gesicki. I don't think they're going to rush out to get a pass catching tight end. It's just not how they've built their offense, where if they went out and got another speed running back, and Jerick McKinnon's still one of the best in the league when it comes to that. I think Jerick McKinnon with the Miami Dolphins could be very, very interesting.
I agree.
And then Drifter thinks everybody's running away from the Browns. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I did see an article, and people just fucking destroyed the writer, that said step one for the Browns should be to move Myles Garrett. And I'm like, that's easily the worst thing you can do at this point.
I will absolutely disagree with you and tell you right now that it is actively being discussed all around. Like, he's not happy there. He's called out coaches. He's made comments about wasting players' primes with terrible teams. I don't know if you realize this, but he got benched the first series last week. They wouldn't let him start because he didn't show up for practice 2 days when he was sick. Didn't even call and tell him he wasn't coming.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's really been a mess. It's something that's been discussed actively within fans, when sports talk nonstop since about mid-season. Should they just trade him? There's people are upset. They're tired of.
They just paid him, right? Like this season.
What's that?
They just paid him, right? Like this season?
No, about 2 or 3 years ago they gave him that extension. They're tired of every game. It's just nonstop false start penalties, or not false start, offsides penalties. The unsportsmanlike conduct penalty gets one every other game. It seems like it costs them that on a third down. It just changes the game. Fans are tired of him. Media's getting tired of him. The Browns are getting tired of him. Yeah, there's a real chance that he gets traded this offseason because they're in cap misery. Like they have $2 million this offseason. If you fast forward to the next offseason, where the cap expected jumped up to like 250, they're already $5 to $10 million over that cap.
Interesting.
Because they have so much money wrapped up in Deshaun Watson and Myles Garrett. There's over $100 million of that already guaranteed to those two.
Well, there you go. So yeah, the Browns an absolute train wreck. Good call on Drifter's part there. I am not as plugged into Cleveland as I once was, and did not realize it was that bad. I would think Myles Garrett would be kind of a cornerstone, but they did put a lot of money into him, and then a lot of money at quarterback. Far too much money at quarterback, most would say.
The problem with the Browns is they have all that money wrapped up in him and Watson. Neither one are performing enough to be game-changing players, whereas the Browns have no defensive tackles, they have no linebackers, and they have below-average safeties.
Yep.
So they can't address either one of those. So they don't have draft picks, and they don't have any free agent salary cap space to go out and address those.
Should be interesting. Yeah, because they're paying Amari Cooper a lot of money as well. So what an absolute
signed Chubb and Denzel Ward with huge contracts. They have no room to make any changes unless they start trading away some players or making some cuts.
Yeah. What an absolute mess. Just a reminder, as I mentioned earlier in the show, we are going to continue this show all off season. It may not be every week because honestly, I do so many of these damn shows, not specifically for our league. I'm going to need a break for a little bit, but we will certainly be back next week to at least talk about the champion and talk a little bit more football. Assuming Dan and I can get the schedule lined up, which I'm sure will be fine. In the offseason, our goal is going to be doing team-by-team wrap-up / draft previews, and we'd like to invite each and every one of you to come on for your team's show so you can defend yourself instead of us just kind of destroying you the entire time. And then, as always, we're going to end the show with the high score game, which nobody participates in. Drifter, you got to come in and at least comment, tell us your picks every week. You're the only one who participates, and you're not even in our damn league. Josh, I'm going to let you – or Josh, I'm so used to working on Club Fantasy. Dan, I'm going to let you go first. Who would you like to say is going to be the high-scoring quarterback, high-scoring flex play?
I will be taking Joe Burrow as the high-scoring quarterback this week. And then I will be taking the Raiders are going to give up. I'll take Christian McCaffrey as my high-scoring flex play for the week.
I knew you were going to go Burrow. And so instead of going with the stack, I think Buffalo-Cincinnati is absolutely going to be the game of the year. And then Drifter just pours a little salt in the wound with let's go Buffalo. I think Buffalo-Cincinnati is absolutely going to be the game of the year. So I'm going to go Josh Allen to be different from you at quarterback and Jamar Chase, who I think is just going to eat. Last week, we did not call either position correct. The high-scoring quarterback was Dak Prescott. The high-scoring flex play was fucking TJ Hawkinson. Thanks, Taylor. However, I had Joe Burrow and Derrick Henry. You had Patrick Mahomes and Josh Jacobs. Our quarterbacks tied. Derrick Henry smashed Josh Jacobs. So I took the W last week. And then, like I said, neither one of us was absolutely right. So, Drifter, if you want to go ahead and drop your players in the comments, the league, if you want to participate since it's the last week. And I guess I should just say Phil and Taylor, because you're the only ones who are actually watching this show this week, because everybody else is mentally checked out. We're looking for top scoring quarterback, top scoring flex play. Dan, it's the last show of 2022. We're on to 2023. What are your parting words for our friends and family?
I love you guys. Hooday and go Bengals. I'm enjoying this Super Bowl run they're about to have again. Drifter, you said game of the year. They're building up like that. I think it's gonna be a slow starting game. Both teams trying to fill each other out. I think the second half is gonna be really entertaining, back and forth. Be a crazy atmosphere too. For Bengals fans, like the game, they're selling the ticket price to get in, and now it's like $500 to get in. Oh yeah, it's crazy.
Good Lord.
Oh yeah, it's out pacing like the playoff tickets normally. Like they're building this up to like it's the game. It is a high stakes game. The winner will be the one. These two teams are going to play each other again in the playoffs. Yeah. This will end up determining the seeding. So the winner of this game will get the home field advantage in the playoffs. So,
that's very interesting. I am a big Patrick Mahomes guy because of fantasy. I'm a big Andy Reid guy because of Philadelphia. So I'm hoping the Chiefs can continue to chug along. Though I did mention to Dan, and I don't know, some of you guys know, I placed bets. And one of my highest yielding bets I called at the beginning of the season was a Philadelphia-Cincinnati Super Bowl. I used to be a big Eagles fan. Dan, obviously a big Bengals fan. So I would love to see that Super Bowl. And not to mention that would turn my $5 bet, just a simple $5 bet, into $755. So I am rooting for the Bengals versus the Eagles in the Super Bowl.
Before we go here, are you starting to turn back into an Eagles fan again? Are you getting to that point?
I mean, I'm gonna root for Gardner Minshew wherever he is because he is the greatest player in NFL history, which was going to be my parting words for the show. I wouldn't say that I'm becoming an Eagles fan, but I like to see the Chiefs win, but it's 100% bandwagon. I'm not going to deny that. I like Andy Reid. I love Patrick Mahomes. I love Travis Kelce. Most of that's because they're on my fantasy team. So that's bandwagon. I like to see the Eagles win, but Josh, who I keep calling you, is a big Eagles fan. So I think that bleeds over to me. But no, I wouldn't go back to being an Eagles fan. However, if they're playing in the Super Bowl just so we can have a fight, I'll be a big Eagles fan that week. I'll wear my Donovan McNabb jersey all week.
I was just kind of curious, if that was if their success, if you're becoming a Jalen Hurts fan, I could see it.
I like it. I just no, still no buy-in whatsoever. I have too many fantasy teams. I root for everybody. Still hate Tom Brady. Still hate Brett Favre, even though he doesn't play anymore. So
Brett Favre's a criminal and Tom Brady's trash now. So
yeah, and probably a criminal. Fuck Tom Brady. No, I was gonna say I'm rooting for my brother. Good luck to you, Phil. But I'm clearly rooting for my brother in this matchup. I am rooting for the best Gardner Minshew game ever, and I hope it all goes to Devonta Smith. I would love to see AJ Brown continue to play well, but maybe not get hurt. Let's just definitely not get hurt. But no, I'm rooting for my brother in this one. It should be a really good championship. Thank you guys who tuned in. Thank you, Drifter, for playing along with us for the last month. We are going to keep this going for all of the offseason just to talk football and fantasy football in general, not necessarily about our league. It should be a good time. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. Good luck this week. Go Taylor.
Love you guys.